Have you ever wondered how your body maintains all the key nutrients that it needs to survive? Whether it be a loaf of bread, a candy bar, a drink of water, or even a salty snack, your body needs to hang on to those key essential nutrients and not pee them out. And so that is the job of the proximal convoluted tubule, which is this part of our nephron right here, which is the main site for reabsorption. So my hope is at the end of today's video, you will understand what nutrients are actually reabsorbed into the body, which ones are not, and how the body actually does this through different processes of active and passive transport. Last video, we talked about the glomerulus and how the blood is filtered through the three membranes and turned into urine, but now we go into a refining process. So this is our next part of the process here in the proximal convoluted tubule, which we will dive into right now. So right here we have depicted a pretty simplified version of the proximal convoluted tubule, and we've outlined some key layers of absorption. And so after the glomerulus, the urine will come over here and it'll continue on to the PCT. And once the urine is in here, we have a bunch of important cells called PCT epithelial cells. Now these epithelial cells have a lot of microvilli on them, really great for reabsorption. And then outside of this tube of the actual lumen just meaning the inside of the PCT. Outside you have an interstitial space, which is this orange piece, and then you have a nearby capillary vessel. The PCT and the entire nephron is surrounded by a lot of blood flow, and all those nutrients that are in here that need to get reabsorbed will eventually get reabsorbed into this blood vessel right here. And so if we dive in, we'll take a little detailed look and a deep dive into the actual nutrients that are absorbed. Alright, so welcome to the inner workings of the proximal convoluted tubule. Just to orient you real quick, up here in the yellow, this is where the urine is. So this is the lumen, or the inside of the PCT. Right here is the edge of the PCT. So here's our epithelial cells that we just took a look at. They are cuboidal in nature, look like a square, and they have a lot of microvilli for absorption. And then here's our interstitial space. It's just the space in between the PCT and the vessel. And then down here we have our vessel right here, and the capillary vessel, which is near the PCT. And so we'll go through our nutrients one by one today, and so we can learn which ones are absorbed and which ones are kicked back out. All right, so we'll go one by one. All right, we'll start with water. So water is an essential thing. We need it for life. We need it to be maintained, and sometimes you don't want to pee all of it out. And so the PCT is responsible for getting the water that's in the lumen up here, which is in the urine, right? And through the process of absorption, it actually gets absorbed through the PCT epithelial cell, and goes through that interstitial space and back into the vessel, as you can see down here. And then once it's in the vessel, it can go to the body, get transported to what cells need the water, whatever cells need some hydration at that time. And so water is a key thing that gets reabsorbed in through this process into the bloodstream. This next process is the process of absorbing CO2. And this process of absorbing CO2 is a little bit complicated, but we can break it down. It's not too bad. And this process of CO2 absorption begins when the CO2 is in the urine as well, and it gets absorbed into the PCT cells again. These guys are really the goats. These guys carry the load of this whole, they make this whole thing happen. It's just absolutely incredible how God has designed these cells to do so many different things. So the CO2 gets absorbed into the cell, and it combines with a water molecule that's in the cell already, okay? And once a CO2 and an H2O form together, they actually form H2CO3, which is also known as carbonic acid. And carbonic acid is a molecule, it's an intermediate molecule pretty much. And once carbonic acid exists in a cell, it's typically broken down by the enzyme carbonic anhydrase, which is depicted right here. Now, carbonic anhydrase can reverse this reaction. It can go either way. So it can convert carbonic acid into H2O and CO2 again, but in this case it'll typically convert it splits into H plus and HCO3 minus, aka bicarbonate. So bicarb and an H plus ion, which is an acid. And so that enzyme will catalyze right here, the H2CO3, the carbonic acid, and split it into bicarb and H plus. Now, the body does not want to maintain this acidic H plus, and so the PCT cell spits it back out into the urine, and so that gets kept in the urine, making your urine more acidic. But it loves bicarb. Bicarb is essential for your acid-base balance throughout your entire body, so it wants to keep it. So how does it get to the blood? It actually takes a little journey, and through a co-transporter, it's called the sodium bicarbonate transporter, it actually goes and gets transported with a sodium molecule that's actually floating around in one of these PCT cells again. And together, it actually goes together. It's called symport. And that's when two electrolyte molecules, or just molecules, travel together. And they travel together, and then they both get absorbed through the interstitial space again and into the bloodstream. And so that's how bicarb and sodium, one-way sodium, ends up in the bloodstream there. Again, both very important for cell function and for maintaining acid-base balance. Moving on to the next molecule here, the main way we absorb sodium. So it could be a lot of salt in the actual urine filtrate that gets past the glomerulus, and so a lot of sodium actually gets absorbed into the PCT cell like we see here. And so here's our cell, and this is one of the most famous channels in the entire body. The sodium-potassium pump is our green guy here. And classic sodium-potassium pump, it pumps 3 sodium out of the cell and 2 potassium into a cell against their concentration gradients. And so that's why I've drawn all these red mitochondria in these PCT cells. They're very abundant with mitochondria because they need to do this active transport process of pumping sodium and potassium against their concentration gradient and getting them to where they need to be. And so sodium will start in the urine, go into the cell, make its way to the sodium-potassium pump, and 3 sodium will go out of the cell into the interstitial space and eventually reabsorbed into the blood. And so that's how that sodium again ends up into the bloodstream to be transported to the cells that need it. Meanwhile, to make this process happen, 2 potassium are pumped then into the PCT cell to actually make the sodium-potassium ATP pump work. And so that's how sodium is mainly transported through the system into the bloodstream. And then our last main molecule that I want to talk about today is glucose. So glucose is essential, and it's not great if it's in your urine because you need glucose to make energy, specifically adenosine triphosphate or ATP. And so if it's found in your urine, you're like, oh, we need that. And so glucose is actually pretty able to cross the border, and it gets absorbed by the PCT cell. And let me zoom out here because I think my floating head is going to block this. But I think this should be good. But as you can see here, it'll go through the interstitial space and eventually get transported into the bloodstream, and then the glucose will be utilized to be broken down by cellular respiration eventually, or anaerobic respiration if need be, and to produce ATP energy. Taking all that into consideration, I've made a little just chart for you, and I have listed everything that is reabsorbed back into the bloodstream right here, and everything that's excreted into the urine and eventually peed out right here. As you can see, the only thing that is excreted is H+, okay? Everything else is reabsorbed back into the bloodstream at this stage in the PCT. So we got water, CO2, sodium, glucose, and bicarb. All of that is absorbed back into the bloodstream from the urine because we need that for our vital functions in our body and everything like that. The only thing, like, remember, we see here is when that carbonic acid gets split, the H+ gets spit back into the urine, and that's why your urine has a lower pH, and that's actually typically more acidic than just your normal blood pH or something like that. And ultimately, that's how our body takes everything that is found in the initial filtrate and takes out all the essential nutrients so that we don't pee out the key things that you need to survive. So I hope this helps. I hope you learned something today. Feel free to check out our next video about the kidneys where we talk about why and how our body absorbs and maintains water. Thank you so much for watching. I am the PT Guy, educating you on God's wonderful creations. I'll see you in the next one.